Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Pens Iceberg. I'm your host, Casey Stamp, alongside my Iceberg panel, Luke Courtwright. How are you doing tonight, Luke?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing fantastic, and it's good to hear that you're doing well as well. Jason, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. It's Evgeny Malkin's world. I'm just living in it.
Absolutely. Evgeny Malkin ruling the hockey world at the moment, current favorite for Hart Trophy. All right, folks, we've got a great show for you tonight. Topics are going to include the first line, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the production, especially over the last, 15 games or so, although you could pretty much pick any game this year, and they've been right up there in terms of top production in the NHL. We're going to talk about future defensive pairings, possibly after the trade deadline and maybe rolling into next year. We're going to talk about Sid's line mates upon the event that he makes a return this season. And finally, we're going to finish up with some game predictions. So don't go anywhere. We've got a great show for you tonight. Stay tuned. Welcome back. What more can you say about the first line at this point? Chris Kunitz, Evgeny Malkin, and James Neal just absolutely tearing it up in terms of points and production. Without this line, the Penguins would most likely be much farther back. Luke, we'll start with you here. Is this the best line in hockey at the moment?
Absolutely. You look at the way they play together. You've got Evgeny Malkin, who's easily the best player on the planet right now in his own right. You have James Neal, who seemingly can't do much wrong with the puck on his stick, getting goals at will here. And you have Chris Kunitz, who we think of him as a guy who's opening up room for his teammates and his line mates. But you look at that goal he had the other afternoon where he just blew by everyone right down the middle of the ice. They're just clicking on all cylinders right now, and I can't see another line in the league at the moment that's even in their league.
Absolutely. I'll definitely concur with that. They've really developed some chemistry. I mean, obviously you saw the chemistry between Malkin and Neal early on in the year, and Chris Kunitz he's a really underrated player in my view. I think, fans see salary sometimes and expect offensive results, but he's such a cerebral player. He's physical. He opens up a lot of space for his line mates. And just like Luke said, that goal the other day against Tampa, you had the Tampa defenders just shadowing Malkin and Neal, and the seas parted ways, and Kunitz was able to go right down the middle for a breakaway. They're a treat to watch right now, and I think they're seeing a lot of the top pairing D-mans trying to shut them down, and they can't right now. And it's really a treat to watch.
And as you guys kind of touched on, Chris Kunitz quietly having some spectacular production. A lot of, he doesn't get a ton of recognition, but he had 4 points in that Winnipeg game. I believe 2 or 3 points in the previous game, and in both games he had really good goals. A guy that not afraid to mix it up physically, gets to the dirty areas in front of the net, easy type of guy to get rebounds. Now he's had a lot of goals called off this year for goalie interference, and I mean, who knows what his goal totals might have been if not for that. But Chris Kunitz really contributes a lot to this top line, and in the last couple of games, we've seen that he has a terrific shot. Jason, do you think he would score more if he shot more? How many goals do you think that he would have, say, if he had James Neal's number of shots?
Wow, that's a pretty good question. I think he probably doesn't look enough for his shots, and that's probably by design, depending on his role on the line. If he's playing with Sid or Malkin, he's kind of there in a supportive role. But yeah, he was a great college player. He was a finalist for the Hobie Baker Award, and he is pretty underrated offensively. Last year he had some injury trouble, but was on pace for his best ever season statistically. Playing with Malkin for a full season, or even Sid for a full season, I mean, his ceiling is probably he could be a 30-goal scorer, a 60-point, 30-goal scorer, and he's just a great compliment to whoever you want to put him with.
And I think you could almost make the argument that if his shot was a little better, his style of play wouldn't necessarily be the same, and he wouldn't be as valuable to the Penguins. Say if he had the shot of a James Neal, he might be taking some more perimeter-based shots, not getting to the front of the net like he's been doing. Recently, we've seen him doing a lot of hacking and whacking right in front of the goaltender, almost prying the puck out of the pads and keeping pucks alive for his teammates, who then come in and knock those rebounds in. So in that sense, he's incredibly valuable to this team. And I really like the way he plays. I almost don't want his shot to be better just because his role is incredibly valuable to this team right now.
And of course, going back to the captain of the ship here, Evgeny Malkin, one of the biggest improvements that I've noticed this year is that he doesn't take as many retaliatory penalties as he had in the past. And James Neal started the year off taking a lot of those penalties as well, slashes and trips and things like that, kind of dumb penalties. He started the year taking a lot of those. He slowed up on those. Certainly Chris Kunitz has kind of slowed up on the penalties since the start of the year. How much has that contributed to the more recent production, even a step up in production from earlier this season that this line has had?
Well, I think you have to look at how this season's gone. The Penguins they hit that stretch of, I think it was 8 games a month or so back, where nothing was going right for them at all. They were falling out of the playoff picture. And I think that was really when a lot of those stupid one hand off the stick, grab a guy, a lot of handsy calls, stick infractions, things like that. Just ill-timed penalties. And I think it really took them to hit that rough patch, get back to basics, just play a fundamentally sound game to really snap them out of that slump and really get their focus back on track. And we've seen some of these penalties subside as a result.
I definitely agree. It's a long season, and that really is an understatement. There's so many peaks and valleys. You kind of have to go through them. The old cliche game by game. You look at the Detroit Red Wings, they had a 6-game losing streak this year as well, and that now they won 20 straight at home and have one of the best records in the league. So, in the case of Evgeny Malkin, I think last year, pre-injury, he still wasn't healthy. There was something a little off about his game, and when he's not able to do what he is used to doing or can do, he got frustrated. He'd take a lazy penalty or retaliatory penalty. He's a very smart player. He's not dumb by any means. He's got a lot of hockey sense and just oozes talent. But I think it's just kind of a victim of the schedule, so to speak. You're just trying to trudge through the season, and they're riding a hot wave right now, and that's pretty much all you can say.
And going back to the subject of penalties here, I mean, a good example of it was early in the season when the Pittsburgh Penguins played the New York Rangers, got up early, then, gave up a few second period goals, and in the third period they were marching back when Chris Kunitz took a really bad couple of penalties, ended up ultimately falling short in that game, and then, of course, just a couple of weeks back, we beat the New York Rangers and, basically stayed out of the penalty box for the majority of the game. And that just goes to show you how much of a difference something like that can make. And of course, Evgeny Malkin had such a great offseason in terms of working out with Mike Kadar and, of course, friend and former teammate Sergei Gonchar. Of course, James Neal worked out with Gary Roberts. I have a feeling that if there were enough Gary Roberts to go around where he could train the entire Penguins team, that might add up to a lot more Stanley Cups. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some possible defensive pairings for the future and Sid's line mates in the return, and we'll get back to you in just a few minutes. Welcome back. Coming into the trade deadline, certainly a lot of talk about maybe another defenseman coming over Pittsburgh's way. We heard a lot of talk about Hal Gill. Of course, we touched on it a bit last week. But certainly we saw a different defensive alignment against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, whether that was just a one-game thing or whether maybe Bilesma wants to shake things up a little bit, seeing as how that second line hasn't really had a ton of production. At this point, what do you see the defensive lines being going forward? Jason, we'll start with you. And a second part to that question, can they keep Ben Lovejoy as a healthy scratch forever, or at some point does he have to get some ice time?
No, he's going to get his chance, and I would have liked actually to seen him inserted in the lineup in the last couple of games. The third pairing of Derek England and Matt Niskanen hasn't had a good showing the last couple of games, and they're not asked to do a ton, but at the same time they've struggled a little bit with some turnovers and just lapses in defensive play, and that's why in a way they're on the third line. I mean they're not built for as a shutdown pairing or anything like that. But if you also look at Paul Martin and Zbynek Michalek, I mean they're both still minus players this season. Michalek is surprisingly a minus 11, and I don't like to read too much into that stat, but it is kind of telling. So I have no problem with what Dan Bilesma did last game and just kind of shaking things up a little bit. And maybe you might not see it going into the playoffs, but just to get people out of a little bit of a funk. You look at the team as a whole. The last 3 games, they've given up 2-0 leads and had to come back. So that's something you definitely can't do every game. And I think he's just looking to shake it up a little bit. And whether that happens consistently in the playoffs, I doubt it, because you have those your top 4 defensemen play major minutes, and go back to Ben Lovejoy. Yeah, I think he's definitely going to get a chance. He's chomping at the bit, and he brings a different element to the team. He's a good skater, definitely with a good first pass, and we've seen him contribute offensively already from the blue line this year. So he's definitely a nice depth to have on board.
Starting with Lovejoy. The thing is with Lovejoy and England kind of rotating in like that, they're 2 different types of players. So I thought it was a good example was the Bruins game. I remember Lovejoy played the previous night. Then they were able to bring in England for a more physical type matchup. If you need someone to drop the gloves, if you need to bang some bodies, he's your guy. If it's more of a skating type game, then you can throw Lovejoy in there. So that's nice. And then coming up with the trade deadline, if they bring in another defenseman, Lovejoy's going to get squeezed out, unfortunately. Just looking numbers-wise, I can't see it going any other way. I do like Ben Lovejoy, though. Real heads-up guy. Unfortunately, sometimes I think he thinks too much, too, but oh well. Coming up with this trade deadline, say you bring in someone like a Hal Gill, you would think he'd be the number 6 guy, and that would leave England out of the lineup also most nights. Going back to Sunday afternoon here, we saw Paul Martin get some time with Derek England, saw Zbynek Michalek get some time with Matt Niskanen, which doesn't really shake things up too much. I'm sure these guys have practiced together just to get some different looks. It's almost similar to a game where you pull your goalie when you're down 3 goals, even though it isn't the goalie's fault. You just need that kind of change to get things kickstarted again. A bunch of these guys just haven't had great seasons. Paul Martin, for his $5 million salary, has caught a lot of flack from all over. Zbynek Michalek, again, he's not a very pretty player to watch, but you kind of rely on him to get some block shots and just generally get in the way. So we haven't really seen that as much as we were accustomed to maybe last season, and just maybe this little mix-up here can get everyone jump-started again.
And never a bad problem to have when you have 2 great players, Derek England and Ben Lovejoy. It's kind of like the situation that we had earlier in the year when the team was fully healthy for those very short amount of games with Joe Vitale and Richard Park. 2 centers, both equally deserving to be centering that 4th line night in and night out. But, of course, one of them's going to have to get the scratch because there's only so many spots at center. Now, of course, you add Cal O'Reilly, to the mix, and if Sid does indeed come back, that's just a log jam at center. You've got Crosby, Malkin, Stoll, O'Reilly, Vitale, and Richard Park. I mean, where do you put all this all the talent here at this point. And of course, I think one of the reasons that they did give Richard Park the nod earlier in the year is because he is a veteran guy. You always need one or two of those guys. For us, it's Steve Sullivan and Richard Park. But going back to Ben Lovejoy for just a second, one of the things that I noticed that he did improve on this year was that last year it seemed a lot, especially they were a little more interchangeable, him and England. Last year, especially if you go back to the series against the Tampa Bay Lightning, Ben Lovejoy never saw a shot that he didn't love to take. And this year he's a little more selective with his shots. And whether we do bring in Hal Gill or any defenseman for that matter, and if he does go the other way, certainly we're going to wish him luck wherever he goes. He's a terrific young man. Now switching sides back over to the offensive side of the puck. If Sidney Crosby does indeed make a return, he's looking like he's on that path. He's skating hard, working out hard, and by the way, Aaron Asham making his return this weekend. That is the speculation. But if Sidney Crosby does come back, do you take anyone off that second line? Do you give him Chris Kunitz? Do you try to fix something that's not working? Do you want to take that line away right now, or do you leave it as is and maybe put Dupuis and Sullivan on his line? Now, Luke, we'll begin with you here. Who do you put on Sidney Crosby's line if he comes back, especially so close to the playoffs? And do you even have him on the first line at this point?
Well, it's tough to say. With the way Kunitz, Malkin, Neal has played, it's hard to say they're not the first line. And who knows how Crosby's going to look. Certainly in his first stint this season, he looked really good, but never want to get too far ahead of yourself at this point. When I was thinking about this earlier today, I was thinking, well, it's got to be Dupuis with Crosby, right? Because they have such a history there. Similar to how Kunitz has been working with that top unit, Dupuis a guy who can kind of free up some room for your man in the middle. And my initial thought was maybe put Sullivan on the left side. Guy with some offensive creativity, knows where to go on the ice. Seems like he would be on that same wavelength as a Sidney Crosby. But why not Jordan Staal? We've seen Jordan Staal kind of come into his own, creating some offense for himself, being more confident with the puck, making some more moves to the net, those power moves that we as Penguins fans desperately want from our wingers. Why not try him out? As we said, there's this logjam at center, even now bringing Cal O'Reilly when we have all these guys in the bottom six who can seemingly fill a third-line center role. Jordan Staal seems like the perfect candidate to jump in there and maybe score some goals alongside Sid.
Great minds must think alike because you stole my thunder. I was thinking along the exact same way. First off, I probably wouldn't touch the top line until there's any kind of sign of possibly sputtering, or maybe if Chris Kunitz's offensive production goes down a little bit. Malkin and Neal have some chemistry they've had all season. I think you have to keep those two together. When Crosby first came back earlier this year for his 8-game stint, he was with Kunitz and Dupuis, and that might happen again just by design because it's familiar for him. He knows who he's playing with. But at the same time, I think you could even a second line of Sullivan and Staal and Crosby is pretty enticing. Jordan Staal, before he got hurt, was on pace to score more than 30 goals this year, a career high pace, and he scored one in his first game back. It's tempting. It definitely is. And you have enough depth at center where you won't falter in the face-off circle or the bottom pairings. The other thing, too, is, hopefully they'll get Tyler Kennedy back before the end of the year, and, whether you want to keep the best third line in hockey together for the playoffs with Matt Cook and Jordan Staal together. Not a bad thing either. But you can have Kennedy. If he's up for the challenge, playing with Sid, that's not a bad line either.
Of course, we saw a little bit of everything earlier the year when Crosby came back. We saw a little bit of Crosby Malkin together. We saw a little bit of Crosby and Staal together. Depending on the timetable and when and if he makes his return, say probably later in the year, I think maybe a month or so before the playoffs, that's when I would estimate, if I had to estimate, that he was going to make a comeback. You have a very limited window to kind test and try things out. So they're going to have to do a lot of testing out in game, but Stahl on Crosby's wing could certainly work, and especially touching on back what Luke said, the power moves that we do love to see from our wingers. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to have some game prediction for you. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. Couple good games coming up for you this week. The first of which we're going to talk about is the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Anaheim Ducks. Of course, I don't know how much significance it holds at this point, but Chris Kunitz's former team. Of course, we get to see our old friend Bruce Boudreau down there in Anaheim, former Washington Capitals coach. So that'll be interesting. Luke, how do you see this game going?
Well, Anaheim's been on a bit of a hot streak as of late. Almost crawling back into the Western Conference playoff picture here. While I do think this will be a close, tight game, I do think the Penguins have a little more balance on their roster right now. Of course, with the top line clicking and maybe kind of fixing some of the problems on the bottom two defensive pairings. I think this will be a close game. I'm still going to say 3-2 Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, always nice to see Bruce return to Pittsburgh. But, Anaheim actually, they scored 2 third-period goals tonight to steal one in Minnesota, so they might be a little tired from tonight. They got to travel to Pittsburgh, and they have some great weapons. I mean, offensively, their top line is scary with Perry, Ryan, and Getzlaff, and but the other side of that coin is that their depth is just not there, and they've just been like Luke said, they've been hot lately, but they've been streaky all season. So I'll say the Pens win at home, and it'll be close. I don't know. I'm not sure about a score, but we'll ride the wave at home.
And certainly the home crowd's been just fantastic as of late, really bringing a lot of energy. As far as Anaheim goes, Ryan Getzlaff not really providing the usual production that he does. Usually he's not healthy any given season. He's had a lot of problems with the knee, certainly, and Corey Perry heating up as of late. Of course, Teemu Solani, always a threat, but our top line ultimately, I mean, they've just been dominant over the last few games, and at home I don't think anything is going to change either. And then on Saturday we are going to have the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, this is going to be a huge game in terms of kind of deciding where the Penguins will be in the division this year, and not just this game, but any divisional game. Specifically Philadelphia, though, they're the only division opponent that we have yet to beat this year, and we're going to have to find a way to beat them if we want to have a chance to win the division. So, Jason, we'll begin with you here. First of all, how imperative is it that we defeat the Philadelphia Flyers on Saturday? And secondly, what do we have to do that, and how do you see this game going?
Well, I think it is a huge game. It's this swing in the standings could help determine who possibly gets a home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs. Barring us catching the Rangers but Philadelphia's been on a little bit of a slide, and it's probably a good time to catch them. And I'm sure Dan Biles is going to grill into his team that this is a team that they haven't beaten this year. And they're going to know that. And I think and basically the way they're going to have to do that is just ride the hot hand of the first line and get on the board first. I think it's imperative, especially on the road. Quiet the Philly crowd and hope for some secondary scoring and a good showing by Flower, who I presume would probably get the start on the road at Philly.
This is definitely going to be a game where they're going to have to lean on that top line, I think. Penguins have had issues with Philly all year, and going down there for an afternoon game on a Saturday the crowd will be raucous, no doubt. You would have to think this would be a close game. What Pittsburgh-Philly game isn't. And while the Flyers are kind of cooling off, these two teams always bring out the more physical sides from one another. So I think it's definitely going to be a close game. I think the Penguins can and really need to win this game, just kind of prove to themselves that they can. and who knows, they'll in the playoffs. If the Penguins are going to go far, they're going to run into Philadelphia. So I think this is a game that the Penguins are going to be really amped for, and they're going to come out on top for this.
And the Penguins are definitely going to need to be ready for a physical game, hit for hit, check for check, fight for fight. Guys like Sestito and Simmons are always going to be willing to engage in the physical game, and certainly at times Philly borders on the goon side. A couple days back when the Flyers played against the Rangers, we saw Sestito have 3 fights in one game. Then, of course, we saw Ronaldo with the slew foot back in New Jersey. Then the boarding penalty against, I believe it was perhaps Detroit. So you got to watch out for that type of thing when you're playing the Flyers. But hopefully the Penguins will be able to lean on their first line and just outproduce them offensively. Certainly the struggles in goal for the Flyers, well documented this year. Brzgarlov has not been what they would have hoped. All right, folks, once again, we thank you for tuning in. It's been a great show, and the fans have been great all season thus far. Luke, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you right back here next week.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Jason, thanks so much for being here tonight, and we'll see you back next week.
Always a pleasure. We'll see you soon.
See you soon, and from all of us here at the Pens Iceberg, we thank you for tuning in. Have a great night and a great week.